without a name, without a real name. After Gimel Tammuz, the situation in the Soviet Union completely changed. So first of all, he translated from Yiddish into Hebrew. And second of all, he added many supplements, many additional things. And it came out in 2 volumes called Ha'ish Shaloi Nichna. It was made, he never had any children, but he had an adopted son. People helped him. They're a wonderful read. Wonderful read. The man who would not submit. Ha'ish Shaloi Nichna. And there's things in that volume that are mamish upsetting. One of the things in that volume is that his father was hard of hearing. His father Rabbi. Rabbi Nanes was born in the colonies. He was born in the colonies in Kherson that the Middle Rebbe had established, which means they were Lubavitch Chassidim Datus, generations. In Lubavitch there was a yeshiva, 10 Chetmimim. So his father brought him to the Rebbe Rashab. His father brought him to the Rebbe Rashab as a boy. He went into Yechidus together with Rebbe Rashab to be accepted into the yeshiva in Lubavitch. And in that first Yechidus, the Rebbe spoke to his father. And at some point, the Rebbe Rashab turns to him and he starts to whisper. Because the Rebbe Rashab knew that his father was hard of hearing and he won't be able to hear the whisper. And the Rebbe tells him, Du vazayin bazeh in the hand, du v'stareist. You will be in their hands, but you'll survive. When they walked out of Yechidus, his father said, what did the Rebbe say that I didn't hear? And he understood that the Rebbe did not want his father to know. Anyway, this is one story. Another story, which is mamish a gewaltige chassidische Meise. It was in Rostov. I mean, I don't know if you know the story that the Rebbe Rashab had the man shlichus. This laser now is a shlichus. Ich weiß was, 1917, 1918, 1919. In those years, there was a minig in Russia. That if you had a Jew on the train, you would wait for the train to go down a mountain. You would open the door and throw the Jew out. And like the Chazal say about the Azazel. They would watch the person become dismembered. The Achzorius, the anti-Semitism. So Leizer Nanis was sent by the Rebbe Nishmaseid Nanashlichus from Rostov. He was pushing afraid for his life. I made a God. But the Rebbe sent him on a shlichus. So he went into the Rebbe before he left. And he told the Rebbe, I'm afraid. And the Rebbe says, what's the matter? Why are you afraid? So he tells the Rebbe, I'm traveling myself. And it was known that they would literally throw Jews off the moving trains. They would kill them. And the Rebbe says, a Jew never travels alone. Wherever he travels, God travels with him. Train. So he goes. He's sitting on the train, and a bunch of Rushas are talking about him in front of him. And they're saying, let's wait till it's going down the mountain. Then we'll take this Jid. Imagine listening to your own death sentence, and you're helpless. We'll take this Jid, we'll open up the door, and we'll throw his body, and we'll watch him become a Soil Azot. Und then sitzt dort und träselt, they're going to kill him. Aber der Rebbe hat gesagt, the Jew is never alone, Hashem is traveling with him. And as they get to the top of the mountain, in other words, they're about to go over to the other side, and the train is going to pick up speed, an alter goy gets charupov, an old Russian says, we hate Trotsky, who was a Yid. He hates Trotsky, because he was a from a Yid. The enemy, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So the goyim thought about it, and they paskin that this guy did not throwing off the train. So he saw b'muchash, adi yitfart nisht alein. But the story that I wanted to share is this. It's a chassidische ma'aseh takeh. There was a time in Rostov that there was no maskir. I don't know if it was one day. There was nobody to be machas in the Yechidus. There was nobody to stand by the door of Yechidus. Like Rabbi Groner stood by the door. Rabbi Lezer Nas was an elder Bacher, a Tamim. So I don't know who said to Lezer, tonight people are going into Yechidus. No, someone needs to stand by the door to keep it moving and so on. The official people are not here. Tonight is your job. Stand by the door, and as Chassidim go in and out, you should move it along. Fine. Amongst the people going into Yechidus was a bitch of the Masmid. The bitch of the Masmid was a gon and a chassid. He was a god gave in a chassid. So when Rabbi Itcher went into the Rebbe Rashab, Lezer Nanis made sure that the door didn't close, so he could hear. It's a big chutzpah. A chassid was in the Yechidus and you're listening in. He made sure that the door was ajar, just an inch, so you could hear the conversation. The Bishop of the Masmid was Achmeni. There's a sikha in Tafresh Tzadik Test where the Fidik ever calls him a chassid, a tzaddik, a Rabbi Yitzchak. The Bishop of the Masmid. So each of the Masmid walks into the Rebbe Rashab, and Lezer Nanis is standing outside listening, and he starts to cry. The Bishop of the Masmid. What's he crying about? He says to the Rebbe Rashab, I took on a new chumrah. I took on a new strictness. But I didn't ask the Rebbe. Chassidim Amo, even big Chassidim, if you wanted to become more religious, you had to get permission. He didn't just do it. He went into the Rebbe. And the Bishop of the Masmid, normally when he took on a hidden mitzvah, he would go to the Rebbe Rashab, he would ask him, and the Rebbe would either okay it or video it. So he says to the Rebbe Shmaseiden, I didn't ask. And I'm thinking that maybe I overstepped my level. And he's crying. And he tells the Rebbe a story. Now, Bashgacha Pratis, Rebbe Lezer Nanis knew the story because he witnessed it. What was the story? The Bishop of the Masmid came to the Kolonius. He came to the Cherson. And he stayed in the Nanis house, in Lezer Nanis' parents' home. And Lezer Nanis was there. First of all, what was the chumrah that he took on? What was the mitzvah? That he would not eat, flesh he never ate, meat he never ate. You're talking about chicken. He would not eat chicken unless he checked chalif before and after the shechita. So that's our chumrah. So he went the Bishop of the Masmid took on this chumrah that he would not eat chicken unless he checked the chalif before the shechita and after the shechita. So he was in the Cherson, and Mrs. Nanis has to prepare food for him. My meramu is good. Here I go with the parentheses. I heard this also from Rabbi Fuchs. That the Bishop of the Masmid did not have a house. He lived out of a suitcase. And Gevana Alman, the phrase that gestorben, his youngest son Mulle, sagt sagen, the tat is in Himmel, the mom is there, from the red, it was Wilma for me. My father's in heaven, my mother's in the ground. His wife passed away young. He never remarried. So he lived in a chemedan. He had a suitcase full of svarim. And wherever he traveled, this is where he lived. If I come in jeden Jahr, Elul in Atvatsk, Rabbi Fuchs told me, Rabbi Fuchs told me, the Bishop Matzah came to Atvatsk. The yeshiva rented a hotel with many rooms. And all the guests who came for Yom Tif were given a room. I don't know if they paid or they didn't pay, but the Bishop of the Masmid, he was a Shaddai. And they got Kaleb, the ganze Leben went to Rebbe. But Tishrei and Elul, he was in Atvatsk. Rabbi Fuchs told me, Jede Nacht hat verbracht. Every night, Elul. One night with Bachrim, one night with Bachrim. And the words Rabbi Fuchs told me, Efek trinken Mashke v'yafish. There's a sikha where the Rebbe says, quote, Zu viel hat gedacht. The two stories are not contradictory. It's a perspective. Rabbi Fuchs told me, getrunken Mashke v'yafish. And the Rebbe said, Zu viel hat gedacht. The Rebbe told the story in the Get, a word that he said once, Friedrich and Rebbe. He would bring it every night. When the Farbrengen was finished, he would lay down for half an hour. A halb shah. He drunk on a shem. That's down from the other land. He was an Ish al-Kim. Ish ruchni. I'm actually Ish al-Kim. A great chassid. So, Erev Rosh Hashanah, Reb Chache, who was the maskir of the Rebbe, calls over Rabbi Fuchs He says, go to my house, and my wife will give you the food for the Itche for the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. Now, to cook for the Itche was impossible. First of all, he carried his own pots. If you wanted to cook for him, he came to your house, you were not kosher. You had to cook in his pots. It was on my son also. To please the Itche, the Masmed was in the Rock. My great-grandparents, Sofa, lived in the Rockaways. They were in Elach Yidden. And it was there angestanden. I don't know what he ate in their house. My grandmother told me I had a bedroom. The Bishop of the Masmed used my room. And it wasn't fair because I didn't have a place to sleep. He never, ever, ever used the bed. He spent 3 weeks in my grandmother's bed. So this is a connection. It's interesting. This is my mother's family. We're not Lubavitchers at all. So Reb Chatzah sent Rabbi Fuchs to his wife, who had a house. They lived in a house, to get food for the Bishop of the Masmed. So he knocks on the door, he walks in, it's Leil Rosh Hashanah, it's not Rosh Hashanah. And he says to Mrs. Fagin, the wife of Rabbi Fagin, Rabbi Fuchs is thinking, what about the chicken? And what about the kugel? And what about the chveisvas, the menhagim? So he's figuring that she went back into the kitchen to get more food. And she's not coming back. He's waiting and he's waiting and he's waiting. Anyway, she walks out, what are you doing here? I'm waiting for the rest of the food. And she tells him, that's it. That's all he's got. A little tzimmis. No milchiks, no fish, no flesh, no gosh, a little tzimmis. So he says to Mrs. Fagin, this is for 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. She says, trust me, he's not going to eat this either. But they're the Bishop of the Masmed. Let's get to Rabbi Fuchs. These stories I heard from him. They're worth repeating. Anyway, so the Bishop of the Masmed walks into the Rebbe Hashab and he starts to cry. He said, I took upon myself I hear the mitzvah that I don't eat chicken if I don't check the chalaf before and check the chalaf after. I was in the colonies. He's telling this to the Rebbe, Rashab. And I stayed in the home of Reb Nanis. And the Blazer Nanis was home. He remembered that. He was there. In other words, he was a witness to both halves of the story. That Mrs. Nanis said to the Bishop of the Masmed, if I'm going to prepare food for you, are you going to eat? So he makes all of his rules. You have to cook in my pots. And the sheikhet has to come to me first. I'll check the chalif. He'll shech the chicken. I'll shech the chalif again. If you'll make it kosher, I'll eat. So she gets the sheikhet to come to the house. The Bishop of the Masmed checks the chalif. The sheikhet checks. He checks the chalif again. She was an Elach Yidina. She kashed the chicken. And he had what to eat Shabbos. He davened the ganzen Tag. He davened all day long. He came home to daven to eat breakfast. 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And Mrs. Nanis puts down for him the cholent, whatever he prepared for him. That was it was kosher enough for him. It's his own pots and his own shchita. And the Bishop of the Masmed says, Shabbos darf messen kugel. The Rebbe said once in the Farbrengen, also da selche versorgen, the alte Rebbe gesagt, the Shabbos darf, but the Rebbe said it, he didn't say that the alte Rebbe said it, but the Sach sagen that the Rebbe said, Shabbos darf messen kugel. Friday night, you have to eat Shabbos. When you make a fancy schmancy dinner and you serve Chinese food, you have to have kugel. Friday night, you have to have kugel. So Minik Chabad. Shabbos day, you have to have kugel. Shabbos Shuddis, I don't know what you eat. So the Bishop of the Masmed said, what's mit kugel?
Does it have to be jar gefilte fish? Or
I didn't say gefilte fish, I said kugel. Kugel.
Just clarify.
Kugel.
A jar kugel.
So Mrs. Nanis goes, and she brings a piece of kugel for the Bishop of the Masmed. The Bishop of the Masmed, the Bishop of the Masmed would not eat food, which was 100% kosher. He was margish. The Gemara says, there's a taisvis. And Hashem protects tzaddikim from doing avedas. So it's more than one place. The Chas Taisa says it means specifically midid achila. Other avedas that tzaddik can be do by mistake, like kisholan, by mistake. But the Eibush that protects tzaddikim when it comes to food. The Bishop of the Masmed knew if the food was kosher but it wasn't to his standards, he wouldn't eat it. So I say in Rusland, he washed for bread. And there were 2 bakers. One baker the Bishop of the Masmed used. Listen, Chaykel Khan tells the story. And the other, it's in his book. And the other baker he didn't use. And after washing, he started to which bakery is it from? So they lied to him. And they told him that it's from the bakery that he eats. And it wasn't. And he didn't eat the bread. It was until he wouldn't eat the bread. You couldn't play games. It was a real deal. So they bring in the kugel, and this kugel sitting on the plate. And before the bitch takes a bite, he turns to Mrs. Nan and says, "Did you put schmaltz in the kugel?" Of course. Is it from my chicken that was shechted after I was? Ooh, I didn't have enough schmaltz. I took the schmaltz from a different chicken. So that was it. There's no kugel Shabbos. As they're sitting there, the Rav of that shtetl shows up. The bitch the masmid was about 35. The Rav was B'sama ben Shivim. He was an older Rav. A very choshev Rav, a big London, a big chassid. He came in to be mevakir, to visit the bitch the masmid. And he's sitting there with this whole conversation is taking place. Now Leza Nanas watched this also. That she puts down kugel, and he's not eating it. And finally he asks Mrs. Nanas, "You put schmaltz in the kugel?" She says, "Of course." "From my chicken?" "Ooh, I didn't have enough schmaltz." So he's not eating it. So the old Rav says, "Veis ich nicht gehad ka kugel." I did not eat kugel today. It's a minhag to eat kugel. If you're not going to eat it, I'm going to eat it. So the Bishop Aspet says, as they say in Ingar and Zeyer and Gesundheit. So this old chassid ate the kugel because it wasn't religious enough for the Bishop Aspet. This is the first half of the story. 6 months later, he's by the Rebbe Rashab in Astov, and he tells them the whole story. He says, "An old Lubavitcherov can eat this, and I can't. Maybe I bit off more than I can chew." And he's pushing, crying. And Leza Nanas has the door open ajar so he can hear the yechidus. And the Bishop the Masmid says, whenever I take on a Hiddur mitzvah, I ask the Rebbe permission. I didn't ask. Maybe I made a mistake. And the Rebbe Rashab says, "Nein itche. Fadir is alles haninyan," the same lashon. No itche, it's good. But he can't accept the Rebbe's words. So the Rebbe has to say it a few times, "Nein itche." So Leza Nanas got to see both halves of the story. The point of the story was, the Chassidim were Yirei Shamayim. But when they took on a higher standard, I know a Jew, I found out by mistake. When I approached him about it, I got very upset how I know. I know a shliach who wears 4 pairs of tefillin. One of his relatives told it to me, Masiyach V'Tomit. But you tell me something, I'm going to go right to the source. So I was shocked. Because this guy's b'chlal not a you, a person. He's not one of those people who wants to be holy. For him to put a port for the film, the Rebbe had to bamishta. He doesn't need to be better than everybody else. He's not that. He's very humble. So the next time I saw him, I said, "I heard that you put on 4 pairs of film." He turns white like a ghost. "How do you know?" So I couldn't tell him. I didn't want to make trouble with the other guy. So whatever, I know. See, very earnest. He says, "I felt like it was a shliach. I felt like I was struggling with something, and I needed more zehirus. I needed more shmir. I needed more guarding. So I asked the Rebbe if I could put on purpose film, and the Rebbe allowed me. But he was very unhappy that I knew. But he didn't do it by himself. He felt that he needs a shmira, an extra protection, because he was out in the boondocks. He says, I wrote to the Rebbe to mail in detail. He was not happy that I knew, but when I asked him, he explained it to me.
Who's the shliach?
I told him.
Just slide that in there.
Ich bin typisch, aber nicht als aggressive. Wait 10 minutes, a few minutes.
Give him another chayim.
Yeah. The word is azoi. You should. The reason I'm having this conversation, the reason I want to bring about this is because Chassidim were very precise. Chassidim are very precise in everything. If you're precise in minhag, you're for sure precise in halacha. And the fact of life is that when we're precise about the little things, I told you the example that I tell the kids, when you take a candy out of your friend's bag, one candy, one What are they called?
Twizzler.
No, the Twizzlers are big. An M&M or whatever it is. Make a bracha. If a person develops a sensitivity to small and yonam of Yiras Shamayim, a bracha Rishon is a very good example, but there's a ribuy examples. Bracha Achreino. If a person is particular about little things, he'll never have a problem with big things. And it's true for yourself, and it's true for your children. It's true in chinuch, and it's an ikir in Lubavitch. The Rebbe dedicated, I can't tell you how much of his time to establish Minhagei Chabad, because he wanted us to know the customs. He wrote them down, he published them, and then he talked about them. Over the years, the Rebbe talked about the Minhagim, and talked about how important they are, and talked about the precise. And today, this is very important to bring up. It's important to bring up, not because it's good to be a lubab. That's good too. It's important to bring up, to bring out the idea that you can't worry about the cosmic stuff. You gotta worry about the micro. And if you worry about the micro, you won't have to worry about the macro. It's just the way it is. I always give the same example. I'm a citizen of the city of New York. We had two mayors successively. One of them was African American, his name was Mayor Dinkins. And after him we had an Italian American whose name was Mayor Giuliani. Both of them ran on a plot. They said what they were going to do. When Dinkins ran for mayor in 1988, he said, I'm not going to go after the kid who stands on the street corner and he's selling drugs for $5. And most of them are black. I'm going to go after the people who are pushing the drugs, who are making the serious money, which is all white people, who are the source of the drugs. And that was what he did as a mayor. During the 4 years of his mayorship, you couldn't walk the streets of Brooklyn. You couldn't walk. It was dangerous. Giuliani came in after him. And he said, I'm going to make quality of life crimes. You can get arrested for making noise, let alone for selling drugs. Now, Dinkins took his position because he was thinking about his constituents. Giuliani took his position, he was thinking about his base, right? But the fact was that when Dinkins was mayor, the city fell. And Giuliani was mayor, the city lifted itself up. It was incredible. Better than it was under Koch, under Beam, under Lindsay. He brought New York back. Why? It's simple. If you want people to live, make the streets safe. And the streets safe doesn't mean you stop murders. You stop graffiti. And if you stop graffiti, there won't be murder. It's just the way it is. You deal with the little things. It's a marshal muchoshes that the kids of Brooklyn all understand because they lived through it when I first started out as a teacher. You deal with the little things. This is a hira from Lubavitch, from the Rebbe, that every Lubavitcher chassid, we're all different places in Avodas Hashem. And today you have, Baruch Hashem, you have heavyweight and middleweight and lightweight and super middleweight, every kind of chassid. Everyone defines himself how religious they are. Everybody needs to understand that if you are one of those people who says, leave the kids alone about the little things, as long as they go to school and they behave, you don't have to make them crazy and bother them. It's a big mistake. Because if you point out to your children the exactness, the preciseness, the correctness about Kleinigkeiten, about Einzelheiten, you won't have to deal with the big issues. And it's true for us as well. And this is a Hirah L'Rabbim, it's a Hirah from the Rebbe's Hanoge. Chaim, everybody, I want to bless us all. We should have nachas from our children, we should nachas from ourselves. Yiddish chsidische nachas. And it shouldn't be b'di'evet, it should be lechatchila. Our children should be, listen, it's hard. It's hard. It's good, but it's hard. It's hard, it's true. I'll admit when I was growing up, it was easier. We were all so poor. What was our tightness, but? It was easier. Our parents raised us. All we knew was the kids today are living in a different world. They have opportunities. They have access. But we have to raise our children We have to raise our kids. Our kids are not going to raise themselves. We have to teach our children Negavaser. We have to teach our children Medani. We have to teach our children Bechaz HaShachar. We have to teach our children Zman Krishma. Shema, saying Shema in time. I always tell the same story. When I was a little kid, my father used to wake us up for Krishma. My brother and I. Like Gesund. He would sing and walk into the bedroom. Shtei tuv, lavoida za. We wanted to kill him. Shtei tuv. And as soon as he said Shema, he let us puff till 12 o'clock. But he wanted to say Krishma. But he would tell us a story that happened in his childhood. That they lived in these big houses when they came from Russia. So they went through all the borders, Poland, Czechoslovakia, France. My father was in Vienna, in Austria. So I don't know what's called Sever, Amamar, and see. I heard all these words, I don't know what they mean. But this is a place that people lived. They had these palaces, old palaces that nobody used, with 30, 40, 50 rooms. 30, 40, 50 rooms with 30, 40, 50 families. Every family got a room. Him and his wife were given a room. The base akis. It was the only available room. The toilet. This was their bedroom. It's a kiss. You understand? So my father was a boy of 10 or 11. He walked. This is before they came to Paris. They were still in Vienna, I think. He comes downstairs, and a Yid in his 60s, one of David HaLaker's sons, a Kivman, was sitting on the front steps and crying. You ain't. Now in those years, for Jews to cry, there was Tzaras on Ashir, people were dying like flies. So my father, as of whatever age he was, 9, 10, 11, asks, was weintet? Why is he crying? Et verschlafen Krishma. This Jew was crying because he missed Man Krishma. I've gone through this meditation 100 times. I mean, this is not a joke. I say to my children, to my students, my father witnessed this. I heard it from him. You're hearing it from me. Could you imagine seeing an adult man crying because he missed Man Krishma? Who's ever seen a man cry because he missed Shema Yisrael Adonai Echad? He missed the clock by 5 minutes. You know what kind of impact that has? When my father would talk about it, you could see the impact. He was a child, just came from Russia, who learned how to read Hebrew when he was 8. He didn't exactly grow up in the Cheder. He went to Chveis Vaz, he was in Moscow. But the impact, an old man, Abba Chamishim, is crying. So my father would tell us the story in the sand, and it would guilt us gefährlich. I told the story to my kids. It didn't work so good. It's not Ador. It's a story. It's passed along.
He was crying with help.
But the Yiddish Shammai, the message was, these things are important. We need to teach this to our children, every father. And you know, it's not, the Rebbe said many times, it's not your kid's fault that you're a hypocrite. I don't want to tell my kids, kach v'kach. You know me. It's not your children's fault that you got problems. You have to raise them. One of the most important things that has to be said, Medav Hadav and the kids need to be taught by our parents, by us, the little tiny aspects of Yiddish Shammai. And then you'll never have a problem with the big. It's true, it's mamish emes. And I've been carrying on. But I actually said what I wanted to say. Took a while. Been seeing. How much do I love you? I'm in touch with your brothers. Reuven. David, yeah. David. Yeah. Chaim. I want to tell you Avot, which is unfortunate at this particular juncture. I was a little kid, and my father was like, stark, took us to Farbrengen, brother and I. Always. And if there was too many people, he would put us on his laps. My father would sit 3-4 hours with a boy on this lap, and this boy on this lap, and we were playing chicken. We were not easy kids. The Mesiras Nefesh was under my father's dedication to us. And when his feet were killing him, he'd put us on the bench. until someone complained that we were blocking and they put us back on his knees. That's how we grew up. And we'll never be able to repay this. We can't even appreciate the Messiah's never. Every Farbrengen, we sat in my father's lap. In those years, the big Farbrengens finished at 3 o'clock in the morning. After Lamed Ches, they finished at 1 o'clock. But the Farbrengens went to 3 in the morning. And my father used to say, this is long. When I was growing up, we went to 5 o'clock in the morning. But the Farbrengens in the 70s went till 3. You remember this, till 3 o'clock in the morning. Normal. So we'd fall asleep on my father's lap. And we always wake up at the same point. Ay, 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 ay. The Farbrengen finished with the Alter Rebbe's Nig. Before the Alter Rebbe's Nig and sang, we would wake up and we had saliva all over our mouth and on the bench. You know when you wake up in a funny position and you drooled all over yourself. Ay, ay, ay. Anyway, what's the point? We woke up with the Alter Rebbe's Nig. So there's a disease. You make a Farbrengen, you get together 100 people, and when the 6 guys left, we have to Alter Rebbe's Nig. This is a Farbrengen Shevat. The Elmer given the Baruch Hashem. The Elmer is gegangen, but there's still a couple of Jews left. So we'll sing the Alter Rebbe's Nig. We're talking about Alter Rebbe's Nig. Yeah, we should have done it. When I Farbrengen more balabatish environment, this is a Chassidish Farbrengen. So I say the Alter Rebbe's Nig right in the beginning. I say, listen, we're all here. You're going to go to sleep in 15 minutes. Let's see. I do it in the beginning. But the Elam is, tonight I didn't do it. But they did. Not bad. Baruch Hashem. And you know the story, the Rebbetzin, the Bachrim were in the house by the Rebbe. And the rule was that when the Rebbe came, you had to leave the house. You had to get out. You weren't supposed to be there. But it was not so easy to sneak out. Sometimes it was impossible. So the Rebbe walked in, and the Bachrim ran away. And the Rebbe says to the Rebbetzin, the Rebbetzin really didn't like that the Bachrim were afraid of the Rebbe. The Rebbetzin really didn't like. Yeah. Chaim Baruch told me that the Rebbetzin were doing B'dikas Chometz. And he was in the basement. They did it. They went to the whole house. And he had to get by. And he was so afraid. And the Rebbetzin said to him, beißt nicht. Why are you so afraid of him? He's a nice guy. But the Rebbetzin couldn't understand when the Rebbe would come in, they would go. And the Rebbe walked into the house, and the Bachrim ran. So the Rebbe says, who's on the gelaufen? So the Rebbetzin said, seine gelaufen kriegen sie eine Chosset. They were in shirts. And the Rebbe walked into the house, they ran to get the hat and the jacket. So the Rebbe asked the Rebbetzin, where are they running? So she gelaufen kriegen them Chosset. So the Chosset is the hat and the jacket and the gadget. But if you want, I'm not going to press you. This is Florida. It's Danish. You don't tell anybody what to do.
Small things.
But if you want the small things, if you want to get your chassid, this is the time to get your chassid. Ah.
No, because sometimes that's the easiest way you finish Farbrengen. You got to get dancing. No,
that's the reason not to do it.
no, I'm saying, no, that's why I'm confused. Yeah, it's in Tanz bei Farbrengen. Das ist eine Sache, aber geht nicht dabei.
How come the Hitchcock always came after the others?
They never used to say a nigga before, nigga after. You know, this is
Because the Russians, because
the Moloch side, after that, you must have found my myth. After that, we looked for Zogan and nigga. There wasn't no reason, stop it, nigga. The Yale made it. But this was the Rebbe.
no, I know.
You know, when the Friedrich Rebbe would see that the Rebbe's nigga, so they stell. But the Friedrich Rebbe, and there was a bowl in front of him, ungefragt mit Friedrich Rebbe, the Rebbe's nigga. There's a bowl, ungefragt mit dem Kaum was gestanden. He wasn't able to stand. When someone's getting people saw. The Rebbe did everything as well. They are previous.
Once he was trying to stand up.
I brought it. Okay. The Friedrich Rebbe. You know, when Friedrich Rebbe was on a lady gebeng. He didn't say what, but it was Makpil. He said no. So he read the Moshe Lashner Sintersky in the next block. He was much older than Friedrich Rebbe. He once came in. And there was no place to sit. He sat down in that chair. The Rebbe didn't say anything. But you could see that till the end of the thing, he was uncomfortable. I saw Mendel Maroza at the tail. Mendel Maroza went to that stuff. They bought the house, he went. And he called up his sisters. He was a little boy. His sisters were old. And he told them, ich bin in Stubben and stuff. They had moved the walls. They couldn't. He was trying to get his sisters to help him. I have a video of him in the Rebbe Hasham's house, trying to remember how it was all those years before. So it's a vision of the Meisels. The mikveh, the bedroom, the way the rooms, they moved the walls. So He was trying to remember how, well, the sisters are much older. They from Zivi Krishna, from Zivi Sheni. And they were might have lived till 100. And he called them up and said, help me figure out what's going on. But it was hard for him.
The mikveh they found by a chance, no? They figured out by a chance.
But the water was still in the boys.
Yeah.
For some reason,
Way,
the mikveh and stuff, they don't raise the water. If you want a table, you have to do pitcher time at a time. There's a mikveh there, but they don't make it comfortable. There's a table and nothing. So wait, so he said that Mendel had sailed. As in the Rabbi Chani was so close to him. The Friedrich the Tate geworden sehr schicke. Mendel Merabah said. The Tate Rabbi Chani. Chani was Adam Gadol, was about Madrege, very, very schicke. And there was a Farbrengen, and the Rebbe Leas was there. And also in that stove, there was always a chair that sat empty. And they got up to dance. And the Kohen was very shikir, so he fell into that chair. And the Rebbe said, Chonye, don't say it.
What was that chair? What was
On the stat, nobody said that, the Fedish. Upon him, it was for the Rebbe to say, I don't know. He had it in New York also. I either heard it from somebody that he walked in the mission and no place to sit, he sat in that chair. The Rebbe didn't say anything to him. But till the Farbrengen finished, he got up. But the Mendel tells the story, he witnessed it. Tati was there shaking, he fell down on his chair. And the Rebbe had missed this thing. Sitting in a different chair.
My father went to the Rebbe. He said it's hard to understand, but
Yeah, he said, Yitzchak and Arois.
my parents had no children.
How many years?
2 years, 4 years. They went to Rebbe for a
And he came to the children's wedding. Did he come to the children's wedding? I'm sure. You know his story?
Yeah.
It's Pellet. You know his story? He didn't have children. He didn't have
I didn't have children companies, my parents also didn't have children.
So somebody came to the Rebbe, Nishka Lubavitch, and asked him about the children. And the Rebbe told him, we will dance at his children's wedding.
Oh, you said, so he came, right? He came to
The Rebbe came to in a dream 3 times. We made up, you're going to come to the wedding. So he showed up the last minute. This is cut not to be necha. Reish ben Yisrael. I'm zugewandt to Reish ben Yisrael and Reish ben Yisrael.
Simpson used to Simpson used to say,
Did your father learn in the Lubavitch?
no, he went to Avdas, and the Lovitch, Rebbe Rivkin, taught him. That's how he got a shot in the 40s, he took the early 40s. He got married in 46, so in the 40s, he was in 70s. He lived in Baruch, went to Avdas for 6 those days, no highway.
It was a bus.
Whatever.
By the way, your father was probably your mother's Kiddush parents. Mine was born.
Who's your mother?
She's Shirman Maybe. So I'm saying she was born over there. So you say you
Life
was there.
was so hard. Did I forget how hard it was? What is the broken windows?
Yeah, that's Giuliani, broken windows.
That's what he called it.
Yeah.
Quality of life crime, that's all I remember.
Broken windows.
But in Avodas Hashem, it's a great Kehirah. Metacht, the greatest Sachen.
You said before about Friedrich Rebbe, about how great he was a writer. So I watched once, they did like a series of lectures of Chabad in a university in Israel. The guy was talking about the Rebbe. So he said it's a shame that Friedrich Rebbe became a Rebbe because he could have been one of the greatest writers in the world. He said it's a shame he became a Rebbe.
Hebrew. That's right, the Rebbe spoke good to see us. Anashir. Right, it's a Yossi.
We lost a writer.
It is
we lost a writer. you listen to him like, wow, he doesn't even like.
My best line from the Yisham is that it's Tisha B'Av, right? They asked, okay, who's going to say Eicha? Mashiach.
Yeah. I once was talking to some people, not from people. So I had to find a form to get their attention. So I spoke about Shlomo Melech. And the question that I asked was, Solomon the poet or Solomon the prophet? That was what I presented it with. At the Kashim Shir Ashirim, Mishlei and Kelis, I had a friend who once told me that Kelis is a perfect book, except for the last pasuk. It ruins. What's the last pasuk? You ever read Kelis? Read it. Kelis is V'ra'isi ani. If there is any taiva you want, any way of life, chokhmah, geld, taivas, whatever you want, I tried it already. Hevel, avolam, omer kelis, hevel, omer kelis, self baba maises. The whole sefer is 12 prakim, goes through different things that people are intrigued by, and every time he says, hevel, aval. And he finishes Save Davar Akel Nishma, so Lakim Yerav, Esmesisav Shemek Deklal. So there's a lot of people say, for sure someone else added it. No way! Solomon would ruin his book with that line. It's so perfect. Kailerdik, Ona Maskan, agnostic. It's Imamish, so simple. Maybe this was what I spoke about, What makes Shlomo Melech? There's a big chochem. Or Shechina Ves mit der Grein. It's the selbe Sache with the next.
If you don't connect to it from there, right?
I saw in Kfar Chabad many years ago. I'm in the terrible position now where I'm a source for stories. It's shrecklich. If I remember my sources, good. I have to know where I saw every story, because now, Rabbi Paltiel said, I saw it in Kfar Chabad magazine. They did an interview with a Jew, a whole interview. He was an academic, a chacham. I don't think he was from. In the Tov Shins, the Rebbe knew all the chachamim of New York. The Yidden, who were smart, whatever chacham they win, the Rebbe knew them. The Rebbe would go into the city a lot. The Rebbe used to go into Manhattan a lot. He visited JTS, he was looking for Kisvayad. The Rebbe knew all the smart people. By smart people, I mean goyim, not like I'm smart. Lieberman from the JTS, Azacha mentioned. And a lot of I have a friend who told me that there's a guy named Rickover. Rickover made the first nuclear submarine with the Shemesh Shabbos. And he lived in Crown Heights. A guy told me that he went to Boston and he saw the Nautilus, that's what it's called. It was on display there. There's a little plaque that reads, this submarine could not have been built without the help and the encouragement of MS.
No.
And this guy swears it's to them.
Wow.
So I made the mistake of repeating it. So some guy on his computer found it, and he went through the whole ship, and he couldn't find the plaque. The mice in the Thames. The guy told me he witnessed it with his eyes. So the story that they had in Kfar Chabad was a Yid was sitting by the Rebbe a night or two before Yud Shevat. And the Rebbe says, you know what's going to happen? What's going to happen? I'm going to take this job. And you and I will never be able to talk again. The Rebbe from taking Chochmah, whatever Chochmah it was. People used to come to 770 to talk. All kinds of Chochmah. These are beautiful stories. I mean, stories are just stories, but they're still nice. A guy rolled into 770, and he wanted to talk Kiddush HaChedesh L'Am. So you know where Meir Halik's closet is. Kiddush HaChedesh, before the guy could say, we took out a pencil, and they made a diagram on the wall. Whatever he put on the wall, and then they had a conversation. I heard from people that diagram stayed in the world for decades, until it was painted up. The Rebbe Pashat made a picture on the wall in that closet where
you ever made a picture in Meir Halik's closet?
Where they kept the wine.
I know that.
So on the wall, said the Rebbe Pashat made a picture, and then he had this conversation. I don't know if the story is true, but I didn't make it up. Someone else made it up. When that diagram stayed on that wall till someone didn't know who made it. It sat on the wall for years. So the Rebbe says to this Chacham, I'm going to take this job. And that's it. So he says to the Rebbe, don't do it. What darfst du das?
This is before you
Before you try.
So the Rebbe knew where he's taking the job.
A couple of days before.
But the Rebbe didn't want to take the job later on.
Zion, Ches, Tennis.
But the Rebbe didn't want to take the job later on. So why is he telling somebody they'll have to?
No, not before the Fidiger passed away. Before you're Aleph. 2 or 3 days before the Farbrengen.
That's a question. I once heard a story for Shem, you question about it? The famous story about Rebbe by the Rebbe's bar mitzvah. The Rabbi told him something.
Right. Nobody knows what.
So, okay, but you have something on it.
So there's different girses. First of all, the Rebbe. Let's first talk
Come back to that
facts.
story.
So I finished the story. So he told the Rebbe, don't do it.
Right? Yeah. That was it.
And the Rebbe did it. The Rebbe did it. There is. I will send you. You'll send me your email. I have on my computer saved a PDF. In the Yiddish Heim, there was an 11-part series done by Nun Ben Yechen. Nun Ben Yechen is Nissen Gordon, called the Zibite Lubavitcher Rebbe Shlita. It started coming out in Yutes, and it continues till Chav Gimel. He interviewed the Rebbe's mother. So the stories in that collection are from the Rebbe's mother. The story is in there. So don't believe me, don't trust me. Send me an email. You know my email address? Paltiel@gmail. I'll give you my card if you want.
Yeah, I'll take your card. I'll actually. There should be not take a card. Is that a real thing? You have a fax number there?
I don't have a fax number, but I have email or WhatsApp. And I saved it on my computer. I'll send you the whole PDF. It's 11. It's long. It's in Yiddish. It's moidendik. But you must understand. That this was Nun Ben Yechen interviewed the Rebbe's mother and wrote these essays. So that's one source of the story.
What's the story?
The bar mitzvah apparently was Thursday night through Shabbos. And the Rebbe was in the other room. The men were in one room, they were in another room. So first of all, if I'm not mistaken, and if I'm making a mistake, you'll look it up and you'll correct me. The Rebbe get a drosha. Get a bar mitzvah speech. And when the Rebbe finished the drosha, I started to cry. But as I geweint, at the ganze Zimmer geweint, the room it fell apart. They started crying. The whole room was sobbing. That's the first story. The second story is that the Tata was gewollt from the Mizun. He wanted something for the Rebbe. And the Rebbe wouldn't agree. From Thursday night till Motzei Shabbos. Motzei Shabbos, the Rebbe was masking. And the mood in the house turned into simcha. I think they danced till the morning. It was a mood in the simcha. If I am not wrong, what I just told you is in Nun Ben Yechanan's account. The way I read it so many years ago. I didn't read it 30 years ago. I read it 40 years ago. Because they're current Yom God, but I'll send you the PDF. You'll read it to yourself. I may be off by a little detail, but that's the toich. So then Nun Ben Yechanan writes. Who knows was at Yemont von Zun? Because the Rebbe's mother doesn't say. She tells the story, and then he speculates. Maybe already then they were talking about the Rebbe's. That's the story that's in the Rishim. There's a shmur, it's a Vishen Chsidim, as that Yemont von him Poshet, you say this Poshet is
What?
simple things. Poshet Yirishmayim. And it took a while. I didn't have the Shmaskim gewesen. So, what happened? I wasn't there. You understand? I wasn't there.
It's all speculations.
So from this thing comes speculation that because I always heard that the Rebbe's father told him then that
that's what Nun Ben Yechanan writes, but he writes it as a hashara. The Rebbe's mother didn't tell him; she didn't know. He writes it as a hashara.
She didn't even know.
What we heard is that when the Rebbe got engaged to the Rebbetzin, so the mother went for Naden. So we had doch schon kein Geld. Ich meine nicht Geld, ich meine der Rebbe.
Right.
So put it in writing. Pretty says, I have another idea, but I can't put it in writing. So how will we know? He says the Chassidim will know.
Right. So this story is printed twice.
Okay, so I was about to ask about that next. Okay.
I got so much when I told this story the first time. publicly. So some guy tracked me down and he says, I'm ruining the whole Lubavitch. The ganze Rebbe geworden neues Kodesh. I don't understand why. I heard the story of the Chatchila from Yossi Kazen, Oliver Shaw, who's gone maybe 25 years. Yossi Kazen heard the story from Kozheminsky, who heard the story from Chaim Liebman on his deathbed.
Chaim Liebman is one of the witnesses that heard the story from the Rebbe.
On his deathbed, he told a story that he was in the house, and that his mother came, and she spent a few weeks to see the house, and to cook in the kale. And then she went to the Frierdiker Rebbe, and she said to the Frierdiker Rebbe, Ich habe Reshus für meinen Mann zum Maskam sein auf den Shidduch. I have permission for my husband to agree to the Shidduch, but I have to insist that you give me a dowry. So the previous Rebbe said, I have no money. So she said, I don't mean money, I mean a base. And the Rebbe agreed. So she asked for it in writing. So the Rebbe said, I can't give it to you in writing. Aber Chassidim von allein verstehen. That's what I heard from Yossi Kazen. Zalman Garari has a book called B'chol Beisi Nemanu. It's really an autobiography. Offiziell hat zweite geschrieben, das all seine Meises. The story is in there.
The story goes even further.
That he was also in the house in Pei Beis. He was 10 years old. He was a Yossi. His father, he was born in Beis. Zalman was born in Beis. He passed away Tafresh Samach. He was 88 years old. His father was Nassan Garaj. They were very close. The garage was very close to the Rabbi. His father had passed away. He was the youngest son. The Frierdiker Rebbe was raising him. He was there when the Rebbe's mother came. He remember the story. Sie kommen zu gehen Tafshin Yud, the Rebbe, ich habe keine Ra. So in his biography, in his book, it says that he went into the Rebbe and he said to the Rebbe, what do we have there? I was in the house when your mother came. And you must remember, the Rebbe's and Chana is sitting in New York. She's right there. You should know, it's a very Pellet Kazakh. The Rebbe's and Chana had a journal that she wrote. That journal was in the Rebbe's house. And when she passed away, as soon as Shiva was over, the Rebbe took everything from her apartment, everything, and put it on President Street on the 3rd floor. After Gimel Tammuz, they found over there the letters that the Rebbe wrote for label. The Rebbe used to sign his brother's name. They were mafasim, a bunch of chasimis. They had it was on the 3rd floor. So they gave it out years ago. But they also found her journal. And they printed Lahak. If you go online, Google Lahak, the Shemas of the Rebbe's mother, you could see it. She used to write in her journal very intermittently, but it goes till Chav Gimel. She wrote the entire year, from the time the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away, that becomes the Rebbe, there isn't a drop of ink. She was here. She saw the schmutz, and she was completely on the Rebbe's team.
Right. But I also heard that the Rebbe came out. The Rebbe came out late to the Farbrengen. It was supposed to start 8:30.
By his mother.
By his mother. He went to his mother first.
Right. For 50 minutes.
Right.
What did they talk about?
You don't know.
In Svare,
yeah.
He was on Tat. The Rebbe probably, I think, the Rebbe came almost an hour late to Farbrengen. The first Farbrengen. He was with his mother. And it was Zalman Garari's gifts is he went into the Rebbe. He said to the Rebbe, he said, I was there. Right. But his girsa was that the Frierdiker Rebbe said, by uns Avart is Avart. The girsa which Chaim Liebman said was, Chassidim will understand themselves. The girsa Zalman Garari is Amirase Legaveya. The word from a tzaddik is a kinyan. I give you my word. It's not like most people give you a word. Weißt du, the Chazal you have. Dvarim aniklim ba'amira. Has to be b'shas chedvese. Am Rebbe's avart is vart. Am uns avart is avart. So he told us all to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe answered him, it's a nice story, but I didn't hear from my father. I heard from my mother. I heard from my father.
So
but I
did
didn't
Rebbe agree that he heard from his mother?
He just said, there's a story that I read, which is so sweet. It's a good story. My memory is not what it was. I used to have a very good memory. I forgot if I read it or if I...
Stop talking about it.
Yeah. So that's pretty reading it up.
You said it before.
But there's a story that someone went over to the Rebbe and spoke to him about being a Rebbe. And the Rebbe told him he has no idea of feeding it up. So he says to the Rebbe, It's very hard to believe that you have Neirah from the Frierdiker Rebbe. It's very hard to believe that Frierdiker Rebbe didn't tell you. So the Rebbe says, "You called me a liar?" So he says to the Rebbe that when the Rebbe Rash was nostalgic, the Rebbe Rashab said he has no hero. But then it was revealed, that before Bar Mitzvah, the Rebbe Marash told him he's going to be a Rebbe. So you have a kasha. The Rebbe Rashab says he was never told. Before Bar Mitzvah he was told. So he tells us all to the Rebbe. And he says, "No, is it from the Sache, was man kann nicht verstehen." That story with the Rebbe Rashab and the Hera is for the things we can't understand. And then he says, "Und das Eichet von der Sachen." This with the Rebbe now is also for the things. And the Rebbe cracked up. You know why? Because it was 100% true. The Rebbe took tzalach. So Shena Meises, like Yishmaga Meises. The Rebbe took tzalach.
There was a nice with Zamgrari that something about going to the Friedrich and getting instructions. Zamgrari said, "Was noch hat Schwer gesagt?" You ever heard that?
He went to the Rebbe.
No, so the Rebbe was telling Zamgrari that he got it off from the Friedrich Rebbe. He went to the oil and he spoke to the Friedrich Rebbe. Zamgrari answered him. He was like, he didn't know what to say. He's like,
I never heard this.
Never heard this?
No.
The story that Samach said like that you won't be the Rebbe, but
Where's
that from?
Sefer told us Kut Levi Yitzchak. That's from my childhood.
Was that question?
Naftali Tzvi Gottlieb, I don't know where he got the stories from. Made a biography of Levi. And you know when he made that biography, there was a whole chapter on the Rebbe. And the Rebbe made him take it out. A whole chapter. Stories that he heard in the name of the Rebbe's mother. Naftali Tzvi Nun Tzadok Gottlieb did not meet the Rebbe's mother, but he did research. That story is in there. Zalman Shneesing had the Kabbalah. You know what Zalman Shneesing was? Zalman Shneesing was Mullah Butman's mother's father. He was the father of Mendel, of Schomberg Schneerson and Mrs. Karbach. Hadassah Karbach. He was a first cousin of Rebbe Leivik. He was the Rebbe, he was a generation older. He had that story in the Mishpacha.
Was Rebbe Leivik supposed to be the Rebbe? Not the Friedrich Rebbe? The Friedrich Rebbe was supposed to be the yeshiva?
What does that mean? What was supposed to be was. Finished.
No, I'm saying, was that...
People talk a lot. Nobody knows.
But after that, the Rebbe and the Rebbe...
So the whole Mishpacha knew it. The Rebbe's grandfather knew it. The Rebbe's father knew it. There was a gekocht in them. If you were from a Baruch Shalom's Mishpacha, you told your children. My father told me, I don't know what the source was, but he heard it in his Bacher, that the Rebbe Leivik wanted to be a Rebbe after the Rebbe Rashab was nostalgic. And when the Rebbe became a chasni, he said, I didn't count correct. It's not from the Tzemach Tzedek. The 4 generations not from the Tzemach Tzedek. It's from the Ravash.
Where's that?
My father told it to me, he heard Yeshiva and L'makar. But it's a fact that when Rebbe Leivik would meet Chassidim, he would say, Ich am dem Rebbe's Mechuten, und ich bin der Vater von the next Rebbe. And they wanted to string him up.
Really?
It was like really bad. The worst thing you could say. He would tell them, my son is going to be the next Rebbe. And in Russia, they didn't exactly want to hear that, you know.
That's one of the reasons they said that he went to Yekter Slav, because he went to Ukraine. So this wouldn't be, you know, in this...
He was there from before. Rabbi Leivik was there from Machtes. The Rebbe Tamal Geret, I remember he spoke. But the Tate gave him from the wichtigste Chassidim from the Rebbe Shmasei. The Rebbe spoke about it.
Why didn't the Rebbe go ever see the Rebbe Rashab?
So again, we know, but there's a sefer called Yemei Bereshis, which is called all the stories that could have happened. It was given out right after Gimel Tammuz by life from Menashe life. It's a Chassidish young man. He was in yeshiva when I was 770. Every story is with a source. But by stories, da wissen wie Leute Marketer sein. So he has there in that story that somebody asked the Rebbe's mother, how do you have such a gerot and a kind? When the Shiksten Nishel has such a gifted son. And she said, reist sich genem and lost him nicht. Now who lost him nicht? Either his father or the Rebbe Rashab or both, that's it. And there's a precedent for it. The Baal Shem Tov said he had Mesiras Nefesh that Alter Rebbe should not know him. Mm-hmm. And I heard from people that the Shmuel walked out of the Rebbe once, white like a ghost, in ganzem Bevulbul. So Levi said, Shmuel, what's the Geshen? What happened? He said, Rebbe hat mir jetzt gesagt, dass zufrieden und nicht gesehen, dem Rebbe nicht mehr sehen. The Rebbe just told me he's happy he never saw the Rebbe Rashab. And if Shmuel was a chassid, happy that he never saw the Rebbe Rashab.
And you heard this from Label?
No. I heard from people. Weil es wohl gestellt in his kasha zum Shvet, that's what he said. It would have disturbed him. I did not hear it from Label, I heard it in Label's name. But it's a story that a lot of people tell.
Reizt doch gern, aber
Molest them nicht. My father told me once, I think my father told me, somebody told me, that when they had the revolution in Tashin Yitzhayah, about the yeshiva, I don't know if you know that they found a letter from Rabbi Yael. Rabbi Yael wrote a letter to Naska Gerari, he was his friend. That whole story in Yitzhayah, and when you read that letter, you see that the Rashag was the tzaddik. The Rashag walked into the Rebbe and said, the yeshiva is the Rebbe's. I'm going to abzang zach. And the Rebbe didn't let him. Und der andere haben sie gemacht narisch. But the Rebbe called in the Bachram. And he punished them because they laid the Zeitung. So the Rebbe said to them about the Shmuel, gewinnt und Lubavitch und ich sehe das, wenn Rebbe nicht mal sagen, Eider, ich bin geboren geworden. Like, why are you starting up with him? Gewinnt Lubavitch und ich sehe das, Eider, ich bin geboren geworden. Like, leave him alone.
Tim Kitzum, did we know anything about the Rebbe not going to Tim Kitzum? Anything about... I just heard a story from Rabbi Edom when I was here about that, but I was curious if you...
Tell them.
And he just said it right now that basically his father...
What are you talking about now?
About the Rebbe not going to Lubavitch or Tim Kitzum. So he just said that his father asked the Rebbe when he drives by Queens, when he comes in, should you go to the Earl or to the Rebbe first? What's the mimic? Like I said, no, he said, was we can Lubavitch. The Rebbe said, Chakim was going to Lubavitch. And it was Tafshin Beis. And he told people then that the way he heard it was, the Rebbe saying Chakim was going to Lubavitch. It's a new, we're starting a new track. That's the way he says the story. It was Yud Aleph in Beis. When he heard that, he chapped.
Kim on the back. Label growing if I bring us in yeshiva. I have a recording of it someplace. It's gewaldic because he reveals things that are very unusual. I have it someplace. The marshal, he was sitting in Farbrengen in yeshiva, and Rabbi Groner is describing yechidus. He would stand by the door. Amalek Titan, there was no one by the door.
No, it was
in the Yuds, there was a list. And you handed, it was like a relay. You handed the list to the next guy. So it was a Seder, you went in, and you handed the list. In other words, there was nobody rushing you. You stood as long as you wanted. And I don't know at what point, Chav Salam, it became, Label stood by the door. So Label told us that when Yechidus was over, he would walk in. And he would say to the Rebbe, Yechidus Gendikt. And the Rebbe would ask Gendikt. He would ask like several times. Nobody else is coming. And the Rebbe would make sure that it was over. And the Rebbe would stand up, stretch himself out, and plop back down. And then stand up a second time. He described it, he did it. And sit back down. I have a recording, audio recording of it. It's interesting. You ever heard such a story? It's interesting. When the Yechidus was over,
he relieved himself.
I don't know what it means, but this is what Label described. This is what Label described. But I want to tell you something else. That when he described what happened when the Rebbe became a Rebbe. Label. Donnerstag in the free Thursday morning. The Farbrengen was Wednesday night. The Rebbe walked into the office. And the mosquito, we had the mosquitoes, Yamut. Chadakov, Leib. I mean, they were the mosquitoes. Label was a young Bachar.
He worked for Rabbi.
He was very he was a Mashadas of the Rebbe. Who else? Nissen Mendel. Maybe that was it.
Label was already working for the Rebbe.
From before Tavshin Yud, from Tavshin Chassid, the Rebbe used to use. And the Rebbe said to Tashmeichel, "No, with that machen a nayim blank, you have to make a new stationery. Because that interyear, the Rebbe used either Merkez or Machane. When the Rebbe wrote letters, he used the stationery of Merkez or Machane. Machane and Blank. So somebody said to the Rebbe, I'm assuming it is a Meshul Leib, but label was present. So the Rebbe, the Rebbe should say what to do. So, again, I have a recording of this stuff. I'm making a mistake. If you'll bother me, I'll find it and I'll send it to you. I have to look through all my years. I have to remember what year and what time of the year, but I saved everything in the Seder Hashanim by me. I can find it. So Rebbe says, no, you make a stationery and I'll edit it. So what do? They took the Frierdiker Rebbe stationery and they changed the name. The Frierdiker Rebbe station is very grand, Grand Rebbe of Lubavitch, the whole thing. Rabbi, and the Rebbe, whatever it was. But the Rebbe doctored it, don't ask. The Rebbe didn't even let them write the word Rabbi, just his name. And they wrote Lubavitch, from Lubavitch. So the Rebbe says it was never in Lubavitch. And the Rebbe wanted to take the word out.
Word Lubavitch out?
The word Lubavitch out. And a Moshe Leib was going crazy. And they were talking to the Rebbe. I mean, I'm sure they spoke great Derech Eretz, but it bothered him. They were going to take it. He's going to say his name, Harav, his first name, Shneesen, and his address, and that's it. So the maskana was, the Rebbe said he could write not from Lubavitch.
Because there was not from Lubavitch.
But so it's, do you know how the Rebbe stationaries look? It says his name, Lubavitch, and then it says the address, 770 Eastern Parkway. And in the beginning, it said business phone. Business phone. Business phone. And Moshe Leib was very bothered by this business phone. Look, the Rebbe is a business. But the Rebbe insisted. The Rebbe insisted that I should say on the English side, business phone. For several years. Maybe Yud Beis or Yud Gimel, the Rebbe let him take off the word business. This is the story of the stationery.
Do we know anything about that? About why the Rebbe didn't go to Teichatun?
Maybe in America at that time was something official.
No, but I'm saying the Rebbe was by the Rebbe's father. He could have gone to Lubavitch even in the later years. I don't know. The Rebbe never went to Teichatun. Do you know anything about that? Anything?
The Rebbe never went to yeshiva b'chlal.
Right.
Yeah, Melamed.
Do you know anything
Rebbe
about
Lincoln.
No, I don't know anything about it. Except for the part that I told you from the Sefer Yismei Bereish, Yismei Melech. Reis Targenim Blastem nicht. I don't know anything. I don't know. They'd have a Rishimis. They came to the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rebbe and Label came to the Frierdiker Rebbe. And they would stand behind him. Fanasiche in the Pace, which is printed. And it's in the Sikh, in the footnote, it says, Omar Laharamash, he says to two people, Sa'arachmones of Eich Bechlal, und auf dir befrat, was es nicht gekannt hat. It's in the Chamas, it's in the Sikh.
The Rebbe is writing about the Rebbe.
The Frierdiker Rebbe said it, and someone wrote Hanocha. Omar, the Ramash, the Rebbe and his brother, Sa'arachmones of Eich Bechlal, und auf dir befrat, was es nicht gekannt hat. They would stand by. But there's a shemus, people write. When Label came to the stove and then he would Farbrengen. And he would cry, and he would Label, that was his brother. And the Anash would sit there and eat him up his words. The Rebbe never opened his mouth. Never said a word. Unless he had a direct Eirah.
In whose presence?
B'chlal. He just didn't speak. Finish. He was a phantom. There's an Igris Kaddish from the Frierdiker Rebbe to the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin when they were in France, maybe 37 or 38. It's like a Baldik brief. These letters are printed, anybody can read them. There's a volume of letters that came out about 15 years ago. The Americans did a few things because of another book that was made. They commissioned Talushkin to make the book. And they also mefarsim the Igris Kaddish. because someone was saying an Alila, and the Rebbe had bechalket kashachet ben the Frierdiker Rebbe, and Gavan Rebbe because he failed as an engineer. So they felt that they have to be. So first, this whole vouch, 300 letters, personal correspondence with the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe, back and forth. And it's not even all the letters, because the letters are about Svarim and about money. Some of them are very boring. But it's a whole krach. The krach is gewaldig. There's things in that krach that should never have seen the light of day.
You know what I saw?
It shouldn't have?
Never.
Why? Because personal.
Very personal.
You know what I saw in this passage there?
Yeshiv actually Bitcha Rayoscha Kvuda Umepat Petes. No, Umestakelas Alai Beineha Hakchulis Vahayovis Umepat Petes. She's mumbling. Tata, it's this and this time, and you haven't yet taken your daily exercise. He was ill. Nobody has to see those words. It's so beautiful. But we need those letters. It's gefährlich. But 1 second. So there's a letter where the Frierdiker Rebbe writes to the Rebbe and the Rebbes that a man whose name is Kach V'Kach. And he's a very interesting person. Thinks very highly of himself. Loves to talk. But you could get good things out of him. And I told him about you. And then the Rebbe writes, he lives in Paris. I want you to go to see him. And I want you to talk to him. But I want you to...
The Rebbe's writing this to
the Frierdiker Rebbe is writing to his children.
His children. Go to his parents.
And then the Rebbe writes, wie viel de schwier Eier schweigen. Von Eier schweigen geht gar nicht der Reis. He's talking to the two of them. When he wrote in Yiddish, he's talking to both of them. When he wrote in Hebrew, he's talking to the Rebbe. How long you get... Nobody... Talk! Talk! Meet the guy. Talk! Red, Farbrengen. You were going to say something.
Over there, the Frierdiker Rebbe gives them brachas to have kids. On and on.
It
Then
stops at a certain point.
and never.
Right.
Like, it was almost a bunch of letters, brachas.
But it's very quick. It stops quite early.
It stops very early and it stops and it doesn't...
Yeah. One of the interesting things in the Krach is that the Frierdiker Rebbe is writing them letters. Like a father. They're so warm. And he says, I want you to write me a letter every day. A long letter. I want you to tell me everything is going on in your life. And they don't do it. So I will, a few weeks later, I didn't get him, he probably didn't write him. This goes on for maybe a year. 6 months for sure.
And why didn't they write?
And at some point, the Rebbe writes back to the Frierdiker Rebbe that the Rebbe wants from a brief. And he writes, there's different kinds of people. Some people see everything going on around them. And other people called Balei Ha'iyun. They only see the thing that they're involved with. And neni oimesh ezemaila. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but this is my nature. My life's boring. You don't want me to tell you what I ate for breakfast. I don't see anything when I'm doing. My life is boring. So I don't have to tell. So for a while, the Frierdiker Rebbe stops. When you read the Igris the first time, you can't believe that they're ignoring the Rebbe. Mela the Rebbe, but the Rebbe, your father asks you to write a letter, you can write him a letter.
Like, why did the Rebbe write?
Of course, nobody knows. My hergish is. And I think it's a good hergish. The Frierdiker Rebbe wrote to them like a father. They answered him like Chassidim. The Rebbe and the Rebbetzin did not treat the Frierdiker Rebbe like a father. Like a chassid.
Even the Rebbetzin, that's a thing.
Yeah, both of them. She didn't write.
What was that before they got married?
No. After the chassid.
She was a friend.
After the chassid. They were first in Germany.
Became like
What became, I don't know. But the fact is, the Rebbe is writing to them so, once they finish, they push it, don't answer. And at some point, he just stops asking. I think it's, to be a kind von a Rebbe, und a chassid, it's one of the greatest, there's a beautiful, beautiful exchange. I think it's Tzaddik Beis. Where the Rebbe wrote to his father, and to the Frierdiker Rebbe, about the inyan of Shminis Shebeshminis. The Rebbe figured out that he's a Talmud Chacham, he figured out So he asked his father, what does Shmini Shebeshminis mean? The Gemara says, Kol Talmid Chacham she'ein b'Shmini Shebeshminis ein Talmid Chacham. So the Rebbe's father wrote a whole Megillah, Rabbi Kabbalah. And he wrote to the Frierdiker Rebbe. And the Frierdiker Rebbe answers, B'negeya, that's who schreibt in Hebrew. Kisheni Pogish Nidaber Ponim El Ponim. When we meet, we'll talk face to face. I'm not writing this down. Kisheni Pogish Nidaber. We have this a few times. You can see the kesher, the connection.
Did Rebbe go to university? Is it? I once heard that the Frierdiker was involved. Is that true?
So I heard a lot of things from a lot of people. And a lot of people have Kleber's documents. I don't know what the facts are, but it looks like the Frierdiker Rebbe didn't think it was such a good idea. When he came to America and he saw what's going on here, he changed completely. Somebody showed me. The Frierdiker Rebbe used to write every day a letter to the Rebbe in Yiddish. I don't know why they never printed in English. They never printed it. The Beis Mashiach printed them all. In other words, they're available if you got Beis Mashiachs. But they were never printed in Yiddish. Every day he wrote the Rebbe a letter in Yiddish. It was his human, basically. And Dr. Van Avart, the Frierdiker Rebbe was describing what's going on in America. And he writes to the Rebbe, Unser Mendel mit sein Wissenschaft wird sehr einnehmen. Unser Mendel. Whatever word, I don't know the word einnehmen. Unser Mendel, he writes to the Rebbe, his wife. Unser Mendel mit seiner Wissenschaft. So I heard from people that after the Rebbe was in America, his yachas to the Rebbe's, the going to college was from the Rebbe's father.
Yeah?
From the Rebbe's father?
There's no question.
Okay, so what,
They